Welcome to our monthly meeting, Together Tech, the project of projects, otherwise known as Game B projects. We have more names than we have projects under the umbrella at the moment. Yeah. We'll each share what our project is, a quick elevator pitch, what we've been up to, if we need any help with it. And then we have two people who have a new project to introduce us to. We're probably sick of hearing about ours. So Adriel, Bentley, do you want to go first on this part of it? And then I'll go after.
I can go first if Adriel. So my current project is Golibot. It's a character that just helps society have conversations about contentious issues. So it takes in facts and brings them back out, organizes the information in a way that everyone can understand what everyone's trying to say about it. So it's a gullible robot. It's a gullible chatbot. So it believes everything you say, but then everyone can have a conversation through it. So it kind of lowers the anger level and the bipolarness. So that's my current main project. Adriel?
Cool. Oh, yeah, it is working. Thanks, Bentley. My project is Conferati, which is an evidence-based information platform. It's largely talked about currently through a related project called WikiElection, which is intended to be sort of IMDb for politics. I'm in Canada, and we have an election in just over 2 weeks. So I'm currently working on a prototype to sort of help summarize some of the different stances and that sort of thing.
All right, I am Jubilee, and I have several projects, but the project I'm most focused on right now is peer coaching. We are launching drop-in peer coaching, Kylie and I, this Tuesday, so it'll be the first time. And then after that, anyone who attends can invite people, and we will split off into different time periods. And I'm not really looking for any help. I've invited 8 different people I sent invites to for this Tuesday. So we'll just see if people show up, and if they don't, then tweak what we got until they do. Dan, do you want to share about your project? And then we're gonna David and Paul are in the hot seat with their project this week. So I would love to hear what's been up with you.
Sure. There's 2 things on my mind. I've been working on an alternative social media platform, which is called Ruva. Maybe I can put the link in. It's www.ruva.app. And it's supposed to be a healthier type of social media platform. So that's one project. And the second one, I'm willing to connect with people. What I really want to work on the next thing I want to do is a type of app that helps people manage a tool library, like a tool sharing library. I think would be really cool. I've looked at a lot of what's out there, and I think we can do a lot better. So that's what I got.
Realize I spoke without being unmuted. All right, David and Paul, who wants to give the quick elevator pitch and or the presentation, if we can figure out how to share it without it costing us all the bandwidth.
Sure. I'll go for it, and hopefully my internet won't mess up again. So our project is called Unrival, and we've been thinking of it in various different ways. So to give an elevator pitch would just be one of the various ways we've been discussing it. But currently, I'm calling it a protocol for solving coordination problems. Maybe I'll just start screen sharing now, or maybe we should, do we want to go all the way around and introduce ourselves first? Go to Paul?
Yeah, get a quick intro from Paul would be great.
Sure. Quick intro. I've been working with David on this project for a month. And as we say, Unrival is kind of a platform to facilitate coordination, lowering the cost of coordination across multiple different goals. So the way that I kind of interface to the project was regarding my goal of connecting the unconnected, so to say. It's been, well, my day job is very different, so it's kind of on a hobby level still, on Rival, but my passion is about connecting the unconnected and closing the digital divide.
Excellent. Thanks so much. Yeah, David, if you want to, I don't know if you want to try sharing again or just dive deeper into.
Oh yeah, I will try, and if it doesn't work, then.
Sorry, perfect. So I'm just going to drop those of us who won't be speaking during the presentation down, and then we'll come back up once the presentation is finished.
Sure. Okay, do you guys see my screen? See anything? Okay, great.
Yeah.
All right. Currently looking at our GitHub repositories, but we're going to start here, which is our website in the making. As you can see, it's very bare at the moment, but I just want to focus on the definition of unrival first. So it's a made-up word, obviously. I actually meant it to be backwards compatible with the word unrivaled, which is usually used in contexts of competition. So it has to evoke competition. So the first definition would be to undo a state of rivalry. So we could think of unrival as undoing rivalry. Or we could also think of it as outcompeting, which is what you might guess it would mean. And then the third definition is a protocol for accomplishing the above. And that's what we're going to be presenting tonight. Unfortunately, I don't have a presentation with slides. I'm just very bad at making those, and I don't like watching them either. So you're just going to have to bear with me as I try to explain it by some illustrations. So as I said, this is we're looking at my white paper right now. So this is a protocol that is meant to facilitate more effective cooperation between agents. And agents are just any users of the protocol. And when I say protocol, I mean as opposed to a platform used by different clients. What's important is just that these set of guidelines are followed. So there is this set of guidelines that make up the protocol. It's kind of a work in progress, but it's just various rules about what sorts of things are valid objects in Unrival. And Unrival is actually all about these objects. Basically, the entire protocol is basically just defining what can be called an Unrival object. And these objects are what actually facilitates these advances in cooperation. So first, we're going to have to talk a little bit about some of these problems that are actually preventing this effective cooperation in the first place. And one of them is kind of hinted at in this definition, the fact that this is a neologism coined by me, the fact that rivalry and competition usually go hand in hand, and rivalry and cooperation might seem like antonyms. That's kind of getting at the heart of the problem. So what we have to do with this protocol is to find a way to be competitive while undoing a state of rivalry. So that would satisfy both of these definitions, and that would give us a protocol for accomplishing this. So to go back to the problem at hand, we are not very good at communicating. We have all these problems, and we like to talk about them and get worked up about them. Big hairy problems like climate change. Choose your problem, and then there's also this other type of problem behind all those problems, and that is the fact that we can't really discuss these problems in a productive way. And that's the problem that this protocol is addressing. So the way I see it, the problem is undergirded by this problem of not being able to communicate reliably. So basically, this protocol is about creating a way for reliable communications to transpire between agents. I use the example in my white paper of what's called the stag hunt, which is this situation game theory that you can read if you want to. I'm not going to go into all the details, but the main gist of it is that sometimes there are situations where the optimal outcome is not the outcome that the rational agents actually play for. So when you're playing a game or when you're competing, you choose a strategy, and there are these situations where you can be a self-interested and rational agent, and the strategy you choose is not the optimal, the strategy that will lead to the optimal outcome. And that might seem sort of paradoxical, but that's based on the fact that sometimes cooperation is required to attain the optimal outcome, and cooperation is possibly too costly. There might be various reasons why we can't cooperate. So this stag hunt is about two different hunters who need to cooperate in order to get a stag, which is the optimal outcome, but they don't end up cooperating, even though they are self-interested, because that's not that turns out to be a worse strategy than just hunting for a smaller animal, a hare. As I said, this is kind of a famous situation in game theory, and I find it counterintuitive, but I think that it can explain a lot about communication. So the question I would ask is, so how can we make it so that the two hunters can actually talk to one another somehow and get the stag? And you can imagine different scenarios. They could send smoke signals to one another. They can call each other on the cell phone. So are these problems?
About 1 or 2 more minutes on the presentation. So give us what you want us to focus on. We're probably all pretty versed in game theory.
Okay. Okay. That's good to know. So basically, the solution that I'm thinking of is to create ways of signaling that have built-in reliability, basically. And these things are those objects that I was referring to. So those unrivaled objects that the protocol defines. So these objects are not just imaginary or like some kind of psychotechnology. They are actual data that agents can interface with. And I have a sort of a client app that I've been building that interacts with these objects. And an example is a ride-sharing platform. So basically, any sorts of, I guess, a good question would be, well, what's the domain of application? What kinds of things could be helped by increased reliability? So the most obvious things are things like, reviews on books and news articles. These things can obviously benefit when people have to put some skin in the game for creating content. But when you look, actually every aspect of the economy is really suffering from this problem of a lack of ways to control for credibility. So basically, Unrival is about controlling the reliability of arbitrary objects. And this is just to demonstrate that it is about basically any sort of object. So I just thought of this idea and created an object for it. So down here we see prove. So if we ask like how do we judge if our attempt to improve the credibility of something is successful or not? So as I see it, there are a couple of different ways. There are objective criteria and subjective. And this is based...
Can I take off the presentation and add everyone back in, and we can ask questions and go from there?
I'll just click through a couple of buttons and then I'll be done.
Okay.
So there are objective criteria, and those are called proofs in this protocol. So any object can be proved. And when you prove an object, it might rely on inherited proofs based on some inheritance that is defined in the object. So like a business might, a platform cooperative, for instance, might inherit from business, and business has its own proof that cooperative rights must satisfy. And so when you prove something, these proofs are all run, and the data that is located at this endpoint, whatever it is proved. So basically it's kind of like any sort of normal web interface could be implemented, wrapped up in these objects that would help improve the credibility. So that's basically it.
All right, I'm just going to remove that, but we'll keep it down just in case, and it will go down. Remove. And back to stream. I don't really need to add Adriel. He could add himself, but there we go. So, questions, comments. Steve has some stuff over here. He was saying. I'm assuming it's Steve because the first part is. He was just mentioning about his elevator pitches, and then I think this is. I think he's still just possibly talking about his thing there. I'll put up on the screen for a moment. And he also wanted to permission to use your graph in his work. He has his own project.
Which graph was that?
I think it was the game theory graph. Was the one that.
Oh well, that's in Wikimedia Commons, and you're free to use it.
There you go. All right. Also, I made a banner for Daniel's project while we were
Awesome.
waiting. We can put that put that in the corner. That might be confusing though, because we're talking about their project. So we'll just turn it off for now. But
So David and Paul, what would y'all like help with most right now? Or in this meeting, what would you like us to discuss and help you craft, I guess, maybe more than after the meeting?
Well, right now in the meeting, I guess just some first impressions, some feedback about what you see as some problems I might run into, that sort of thing. Whatever occurs to you, really.
Okay, so yeah, my thought on that is that that like a lot of our projects, we're often doing something that hasn't really been done with. So a quick phrase of like, rideshare, Uber for plants is not something we can phrase it. So a majority of the time is working on the explanation. And I think there's a lot of opportunity to improve your explanation, because I think we're all really familiar with
I
game.
think so too.
Yeah, we're all familiar with a lot of the terms that you have, but I'm still kind of at a loss on what it is, and I can give a lot of suggestions on how to get there and maybe some questions. And I do review like startup pitches pretty often and help people craft them as part of my volunteer time with some startups in my local city. So we could focus on that, but maybe give a moment if anyone else wants to give first impressions, and I could definitely also be wrong on that. So Jubilee or Adriel, or
I'd say if you're bringing in game theory, one, like I said, we're familiar with it, but like a quick story of that stag, like without the two people can hunt a stag together, but if either of them defect, they're going to go hungry while the other person gets a rabbit, or they can both defect and get a rabbit, right? Like just that is what the game theory is, and then that your tool is working to work with the defection is my understanding, that it's there to help you figure out who's going to cooperate and who's going to defect, because that is like the point of game theory, that when you go on multiple games you start to know whether the other person is or isn't, but to know that about someone in your first interaction. I'm assuming that's what the protocol is about, but the quick explanation of game theory and then actually how the app itself or the protocol actually would do that. And we'll add David back in. I'm realizing hopefully that.
I'm in Germany, the busiest time of the day for the internet. So
just a quick explanation on game theory. Like without it, you don't need to explain game theory, but just the prisoner's dilemma, right? Like the hunting, exactly what you have the picture there. There's two people, they can cooperate and hunt a stag and get enough meat for the week, or they can, if one of them defects, then the person who was going to cooperate goes hungry. The other, or they can. So it's on. You both cooperate, you get something better. You both defect, you get something worse. But if you're the one who cooperates and they defect, you're at a disadvantage, and that's what you're trying to solve, right? Is that defector status, and then how your application actually works to solve that. I think it looks like it's a protocol on the blockchain where you're able to actually vouch for each other and say, yes, I got a ride from this person. Yes, I gave this person a ride, or that kind of thing. And that it's a protocol, so you don't necessarily need to have a ride share to be able to do that, but anyone could use it if they wanted to start a ride share, or like Dan's tool library or that kind of thing. Like what? Yeah.
So let me build on that, Jubilee. Is that I would say to drop game theory and to draw on the initial 1 or 2 minute pitch and drop the stag example. What I'd suggest is instead use an example that illustrates that's more real world, and then the problem could be solved, because then you're not explaining game theory and the stag and then giving it, because eventually you're going to need to give them an example. So choose an example like the rideshare thing, and I would just start off right with that. Because you're going to have to explain not necessarily game theory, but you're going to have to explain the situation, and then most people who aren't familiar with game theory would be able to grok it. And I don't know, the rideshare might be a good thing. And I guess that dives into some questions on what exactly is it, because a lot of the terms you're using are, I think, are the kind of technical terms like object and agent. But I think for a lot of people, one thing, those are, even in the technical terms, it's very, very vague. And if I don't know the technical terms, then it completely glaze over on that. So I could ask a couple questions to help me understand in more detail what it is, unless Adriel or anyone else wants to give some initial feedback.
I guess one question that I had for the proof, my understanding from what you had said, sort of an example, was that proof is really just a user voting that something is sort of true. Like, so yes, they sell cookies and they're good, or yes, that person gave me a ride. Is that accurate-ish?
No, that's what I call a claim. So that's you can think of that like a subjective proof, and a proof is objective. So a proof is actually computer code that is attached to an object, and it's run, and it's either satisfied or not.
Okay, I guess what does it prove? Like, if the computer's doing something to add that, what is it actually a sign of?
So proofs, like every object is made up of parts, and a proof would be one of these parts. And a part has a reference to an address, and a proof is stored at that address. So when proofs are run, basically it is computed which proofs exactly need to be satisfied. And like I said, that has to do with inheritance. So like if we want to prove something about a dog, for example, a dog inherits from a mammal, which inherits from an animal and life form. So we have to of all of these different entities which it inherits from, and these are all stored at addresses that have a, like, let's say, a piece of Python code that is run, and what it is fed as input. So this Python code, what that is fed as input is the address of the object being proved. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
So I guess one thing I want to separate is, are you proving an object, or are you proving a record within an object?
An object. So the proof runs on the address, and the address is basically synonymous with the object, because this is content-based addresses. So it's basically like the address is like a fingerprint of the object.
So that's all still very, very abstract. Is there an example you can give a little bit more specifically, like the one you were stepping through, except that still seemed kind of vague? If you're doing a rideshare program, what's the rideshare program before your tool exists, and how's it better after your tool exists?
Do you mind if?
Yeah,
I want to hear the answer, but I think I understand what's being said. Maybe can you clarify? What I heard was I could be a person that sells things on eBay, and I could like build up my reputation really good on eBay. But if I go to another app and now I want to do a DoorDash or an Uber, my reputation from eBay has nothing to do with that other reputation, and you're trying to fix that problem. Is that kind of what you're doing?
Well, that enters into it, but the problem I'd say I'm trying to fix is the problem of gameable reputations. So like, I think that you were right, Bentley, that the ride sharing isn't necessarily the best way to explain this. I think a better way would be to talk about reviews on like an e-commerce website. So basically, everybody knows that Amazon reviews are gameable. You can pay for reviews, and you can also have people leave really bad reviews because they just they have some bone to pick with somebody. So the problem is there's no skin in the game for the reviewer. And this is something that can be solved with claims, because claims basically require skin in the game of the person who is claiming, because they're required to stake some of their credibility on that claim.
Okay, yeah, thanks for clarifying. And I think when you rewatch this, you'll be able to pick out the sentences that kind of condense your message really well. And I think it's important to think about, like, when you're talking about, like, when you're pitching your idea, you do have different audiences. So sometimes you're just talking to the end user. Sometimes you're talking to programmers. Sometimes you're talking to, like, people that you want to invest, or like who want to, like, understand the philosophical level. And so it's hard to talk to all of those people at once. I really loved what you said at the end. You're like, basically, we're trying to solve this internet credibility problem. And like you said, like that one sentence, I was like, oh, okay, that's what's going on. But you talked for 12 minutes before that. But right, your audience is important, and it's cool to understand the idea a little bit more. So that's my feedback a little bit. You're going to want the more people you can talk to about your idea and say, hey, will you just listen to this and then tell me what you think? You're going to be able to kind of hone your message more and more and more. I went through the same process where it took me 30 minutes to explain Ruva, and now I got it down to 60 seconds. And there's always more to explain, but people's attention spans are so short. So you got to think, I have 20 seconds to say my app is about internet credibility. And then you wait for someone to say, oh, tell me more. And getting to the point first and then the explanation afterwards. A lot of people don't care how you're accomplishing it. They just care what you're doing. And then some people will say, oh, that's interesting. How are you doing that? That's my feedback, I suppose.
I have to say, yeah, what you just said is the most explanation that I now understand more what you're doing, that skin in the game for the reviewer themselves. And I think I unmuted to ask Paul if he could unmute, because I muted him and I didn't know if he could then technically unmute. So we're good. All right.
Yeah, I just wanted to add also one thing that really attracted me about Unrival is the generic way to verify anything, so to say. So other than using it for credibility, is also for rooting out disinformation. I said before, my passion is about connecting the unconnected, and my experience is primarily in Nigeria. And if any of you know anything about Nigeria, you know there's a lot of bad talk about information in Nigeria. There's a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of misinformation in countries with which are not as digitally literate as we are. And the point about credibility can also be transferred by the method of proofs, which was one of the simple objects, or what do you call it, the atomic objects in Unrival. That mechanism sounds very powerful because it's so generic in Unrival. I just want to add that in as well.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. That's a good point. Actually, I was to answer Daniel. One reason I don't just state that up front is because that's kind of a constrained way of looking at Unrival, in my opinion. So like the problem of credibility is kind of easy to explain, but it's just an analog that people are able to understand because they're used to things like Amazon and YouTube and fake news and all that. But that's not actually the entire domain of application for Unrival.
Yes, although a lot of the companies we know today, the founders had a big vision, but in the first several years, they almost never told anyone the whole vision. So I think you have to have the small piece that they'll understand, and then you can say and more at the end of that. So like Goalybot, it eventually may be the way that we as a country vote on things. But if I go in saying, you're not going to vote anymore, you're going to use this fact-based system, people look at me strange. So telling them it's a little thing that helps you make a decision, I think. So I think, it is interesting, because I was thinking, well, now I don't know how a reliable review, which is the way I would phrase it, rather than, credibility is a bigger picture. Reliable review is one use case. I don't see yet how that corresponds to the coordination that you're solving. So I wonder, so there's two ways that I've seen that solved in the past. Is one is give them two examples that are very different but are relatable. So reliable reviews, and then also and I think giving skin in the game for the reviewer is a good way to say it. But then another example that kind of shows the other end of the spectrum of what this thing, of what your tool can do, might be one way to solve that. Or another thing is just don't, because Amazon was originally just books, right? But they always knew they were going to do it. And the founder of Uber, it was taxi, but they had the idea from the beginning that they were going to be able to deliver food and deliver all this other stuff. And it took them a decade or two to get there. So I think it's okay to undersell the scope, because also if it's too big of a scope, people will flat out not believe that it's possible. If they said, a search engine when Google first came out, if you said later on everyone was going to do it and Google would be a verb, no one would believe you, because we had Alta Vista and we had 10 different search engines, right? So almost every one of our projects, you can't tell everyone off the bat the whole idea, because their brain just kind of melts. So those are some thoughts. And it's okay if they don't see the whole thing, as long as they're enticed by it and you draw people in, and then it builds over time.
Also, I just want to go back.
So
and
you were
Go ahead. Oh, did we lose him?
Oh, okay. Well, I just wanted to address a point that Bitly made really quickly. So you were saying that you can't really see how the reviews help with the coordination problems, and that's actually why I don't want to talk about this solely in terms of reviews. So if we talk about just opinions, basically like honest opinions. One application of this could possibly be like coming up with scientific theories. So there's this community that I'm part of that's centered on the podcast called Theories of Everything, and the founder wants to find this open source theory of everything by basically putting everybody's ideas together, finding some way for people to sense make about like a theory of everything based on physics or consciousness or whatever. And I saw how they were going about that, and it's basically like collect a bunch of ideas in a Google document. And so how do you start to how do you start to put all that information together? Basically, you're going to have to come to some consensus on what deserves to be in this theory of everything. And that consensus is based on people's opinions. And those opinions are basically claims that are made implicitly or explicitly. So this is another domain of application for something like this.
Now, what's interesting about that is that everything you said in that description also applies to Adriel and my projects. Like exactly. So now we have completely different ways of solving that problem. But it's interesting that they both have the same scope. So then the question comes, how do you differentiate between the two? So I think something just below that. So yeah, I think the reviews are too far down, and what you just said is a little bit too high. But I guess I don't see, yeah. So I haven't found that right level yet.
I just want to drill in a bit more to like some specific examples and try to get a better handle on the whole claims and proofs thing. So, David, you had mentioned, I think, one example being the reviews, and that you couldn't just go and say, it's 1-star or 5-star for a business. You would kind of have to do it under a claim. You have to make a claim. Is that like, I'm making a claim that I bought something there and my experience was bad? Or is it more towards a general vibe of like, this place is next to a bus stop, or this place has, awesome cookies, or whatever individual claim is? Like, what would be an example claim about a business? Is it very specific, or is it sort of you're voting towards 10 things about a business and you're saying which one is true?
Well, so one weakness with Amazon reviews, for instance, sometimes you'll see a 1-star review and you don't know what that review is actually reviewing. Like, the delivery guy dropped a package, or I don't like the book's publisher, or I don't like Amazon. And so there's basically no granularity with any sort with an Amazon review. And with an Unrival claim, you're making a claim with a certain kind of like a domain, you could say. So it's called an interpretation actually within Unrival, but you can think of it as within a certain domain. So I was talking with Paul about this, and he brought up the example of McDonald's. Like, he would, like, maybe he's a hippie and he would give McDonald's a bad rating based on the fact that he's an environmentalist. Well, he would be rating a different thing than the person who's rating the taste of the burger, and their claims would not be they would not be found on the same namespace, basically.
Okay. Do you have, like, with the example of McDonald's, what's an example claim? Is it just like their burgers are good?
Well, this would be up to it's really up to whoever adds an object to Unrival. So, like, if these objects are wrappers for the thing, what I would add is like if we go back to the theory of everything example, I would add, this is a consistent theory, and I don't think I could come up with a computer program to prove that. I would need the opinions of people who understand what consistent means to judge that.
Right.
That's just an example of a claim.
If we go back to something that probably everybody on this call and everybody watching has experienced, something like buying something from Amazon. What's an example claim, either good or bad, about a specific product? Right? Like, if you wanted to leave a good or bad, some good or bad feedback for a product on Amazon, what's a specific example?
So might be like delivery time or something like that. I mean, you couldn't expect to write a computer program to check delivery time. Maybe you could, but it's a lot more straightforward to do this as a subjective sort of a claim.
Right.
So there's a claim about delivery time. Somebody who has firsthand experience delivery time can leave an assessment of this claim, and that's public. And other people who are going to have something to do with this object that has been assessed will be able to see that that some agents have disagreed with their claims.
Right. Okay, so it sounds like one person can sort of submit a possible claim for something. So it might be something like, hey, for this item, I had really slow delivery time. And then other people that also bought that item can then say, yes, I agree, or no, that's not true. Or is it just each person adds their own claim, and then you sort of try to aggregate them?
Well, the way that I'm thinking of it currently, basically anybody's free to leave any sorts of claims they want to. If you're leaving a claim, though, you're staking something on it. So it's not in your best interest to make claims that are unfounded. If you don't have any experience of a certain item, then and you claim that it's a great item, you're taking a bet or taking a risk. You're placing a bet on that.
Right. Okay. So can you only ever add a claim, or like if everybody on this call bought something and we all had slow delivery times, are we all adding our own independent claim saying it's slow? Or maybe Bentley got his first, but it was still slow, so he has a claim saying it's slow, and then every one of us says, yeah, mine's slow too, and we vote for his claim? Or do we just add our own?
Well, it depends on exactly what you're reviewing. So if you are indeed reviewing the delivery time, there would be a specific namespace for that you would be leaving a review on, or basically it's called an assessment that you would be assessing.
Right.
So the answer is yes, there would be one object that multiple agents would be leaving assessments on, and this claim would be on that one object.
Right. Okay.
All right, and a couple of times you've mentioned. Sorry, Adriel, if you want to.
Nope. Go ahead.
You've mentioned a stake, and you've mentioned a proof, a computer program proof. So when you're saying stake, what is the person staking when they make a claim?
These, like the stake mechanism isn't completely worked out, but I have basically some requirements for it, and there are various ways of accomplishing this. So
can you just give an example? Whatever I'm asking these, it's always like, give me an example for what it might look like in the future. We don't need
so you're
staking. Pause for a second, because I'm sensing a theme. When I work with very technical people, one of the tricks I like to try, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, pretend there's no computers. There's just a magic box that you're asking, some question, or you're doing something and trying to figure out if people agree, just through like not computers, not internet, not software, at the very highest level, like what sort of ideas are passing between people. What's a real world example using this magic box that we could, figure out if which burger place was the best in town, or was the delivery time good? Like taking all the technical parts out and just sheerly how our ideas passed.
So basically, you're staking your reputation. You're staking some amount of your reputation on claims that you make. And you can say that in just kind of colloquial English, like I stake my reputation on that. It means nothing though. There's no skin in the game when you make a statement like that. This protocol is for making that possible, to actually stake some reputation on something.
And then how would that play out one way or the other? Like how would that, if it was good, what would that look like? And if it was bad, right? If you were lying, how would that, like, what would the end result be?
So let's say you stake some reputation on something, and it turns out that other agents agree with you, then you will get something back for that. You'll accumulate some reputation in a particular domain. So we can say there are some problems with that, having to do with what's called Kane's beauty pageant, which I don't want to go into, but basically there's some hairy issues to sort out, but basically that's the idea.
So it is a credibility reputation system.
Right. And let's say people disagree with you in the future, then you lose some reputation. So it's kind of intuitive, I think.
See, so it sounds a bit like you could almost use this to like become a food critic from the ground up, right? Where like if you're going to all the restaurants in town and say, oh, this place has great burgers, this was this. I went to this place, oh, terrible, this, okay, good ambient. And you're sort of voting. And then as people agree with you and disagree with you, they're like, wow, they're great at judging food. Turns out, they don't like, they don't like rice. So there's certain restaurants that maybe don't listen to their opinion on. But for these ones, 90% of people seem to agree with them. So, they're a food critic in this area. Does that make sense?
Yeah, something like that.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry. I'm not sure if you broke out or I did. But yeah, and also be a great way of finding the very best food critics around, because they would very quickly rise to the top. Whereas, to be a food critic, I'm sure you just need a lot of connections and, in high places, usually.
Right, yeah. With the current sort of top-down, there's 3 newspapers, pick one, but they're all just the organizations that they are with sort of top down. Okay, I think that makes sense. With your sort of game theory example, with the idea of sort of having that really truncated version, but it seems a bit like you could also have an example there where if you even just knew what percentage of the time does this hunter tend to cooperate or not. If you knew that, if there was two people and you were, able to see, does that hunter try to, defect 100% of the time? I'm not going to try and cooperate. If they try and cooperate 75% of the time, maybe I'll risk it. Like to actually have.
Yeah, I think with that example, with that example, the real problem I think is the problem. I mean, there's the physical medium, communications technologies developed throughout history. We've gotten better at sending messages and all that. But then there's also deception, and we as much advancement as we have in communications technology, we've gotten that much better at deceiving one another. So that problem isn't solved just by having a better medium. And I think that's really what I'm trying to address with this.
Okay.
One of the I don't know if your app would look at this, but one of the things I was looking at before this was there are certain people who have a professional reputation that they're more worried about losing that professional reputation than they are about giving their professional opinion. Whereas if they could do it anonymously, they may have a different thinking of doctors needing to critique a certain pharmaceutical drug that's out there or something, right? If they think they're going to lose their sponsorship or they think that they're going to get their medical license revoked, they're going to be much more likely, like if you were able to actually anonymously poll doctors and ask, do you feel this is safe or do you think this is a good treatment, versus them doing that publicly. That there are certain times you want it to be anonymous and certain times you want the person's stake to be like, I feel like doctors have almost too much stake in that. So therefore they have to just go with the status quo.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And I haven't really thought that much about it, to be honest. I think that it's dependent on other problems, though. I mean, like doctors not wanting to be honest about their opinions also has to do with a very polluted information ecology. The fact that they can't talk about their real opinions because
Fortunately, the freezing because we're on media owned by Goliath.
Sorry about that. So did you get my answer? I think that it's also dependent on the polluted information ecology. So I'm basically saying, like, that's a big problem, and I don't know how that can be solved, but I think it's dependent on other problems to do with credibility in some ways.
Yeah, because Paul had mentioned misinformation. So I can see how a credibility system could help with that to some extent. Although I'm wondering, yeah. So I think I understand everything except where the proofs come in. We probably don't have time to go in that level of detail. I would suggest that we have another meeting like this and dig a little deeper. I think there's some value in that, either on a regular scheduled one or a separate scheduled one. I'd like to dig in a little deeper and see how this project might dovetail in with what Adriel and I are doing.
Totally. Yeah, I see a lot of alignment.
Boss David.
Yeah, do it. You guys can dovetail right together. Just like it's a carpenter term, right? Carpentry term.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's like this.
Yep. Yeah. Although Adrian and I have supposed to have been dovetailing for about a year now.
Yeah, if you two can't dovetail, if you two can't even dovetail, what do you think this other dovetail is like? Come on.
It's slow. It's a slow process.
Yeah.
But it does eventually happen. Maybe
I'm
if
not sure
he and
how
I
we would
weren't
technically
working.
dovetail yet. I think it's more just like we're, aligned, moving in the same direction, knowing what the other is doing, and then if there's a chance
And learn
to,
and
yeah, exactly.
learning from each other. Yeah.
There's also if you already have a project you think is perfect, then there's no possibility to dovetail with anyone else. Whereas when both are a work in progress, even if not yet, it could be in the future, or they could never dovetail, or one might become something that the other one absorbs, right? And leaving space for all of that is partly owning that no one has it figured out yet. And those who do aren't part of these types of conversations because they've already got it figured out and they can't learn from anyone else. So therefore their projects go basically nowhere.
Yeah, my project's perfect.
Science of projects.
I missed what Daniel said. Something.
And you said the science of projects?
Yeah. All right. Any closing statements? We're just coming down to the hour. It doesn't have to be closing statements yet, but around that. Almost there.
No, seems like an intriguing project. I think we're here to help if you want to work on different, running different ways of pitching it past us, or reviewing stuff. And so at some point we might want to talk about where the proofs come in, because I think I understand everything else. But yeah, finding the right example and how to give it in 60 seconds or a minute to have people ask the next question.
Yeah, well, I haven't figured out a good way to do that. That's not very technical. So best I can say is, there are certain things that are objective, and that's where proofs come in. So like, obviously reviews on Amazon and all that, those are subjective, and those are handled by claims, and proofs are for anything that you would want to verify that's objective, like this document includes this document has a certain encoding, for example. That would be taken care of by proof.
My last thoughts are, hey, David, keep it up. Let us know how we can follow your project outside of this. Maybe go back to the YouTube and leave a comment. I'm not sure how to follow the project. It sounds, if you're like me and you have a strong faith in your idea, it's just a matter of learning to communicate it well. Glad to be here. Bentley, thank you for the advice all along the way that you've helped me along the way. And I'm moving from my idea phase to learning how to manage an actual project, which is something else entirely. So thank you for the advice. And I'll be in touch with any of you that I've been talking to. So thank you.
Yeah, and if we have time for a closing statement from me, I'd say the same. You guys have already given me some very good feedback, especially regarding the presentation and how I can make this more understandable for a general audience. So thanks for that.
I'll also just say thank you for having us and for the feedback. And looking forward to talk with you next time. The Unrival project is on GitHub for now also. So that's a place to check it out.
Can you go ahead and post the link to that somewhere, and we'll make sure to share it out as well.
Not right now. I'm still okay. David, can you do that?
Yeah, or later.
Yeah. I just posted it in the chat.
Got it. We'll share it out in a couple places.
Yes, and thank you, David and Paul, for joining and sharing your project, and thank you, Daniel, for coming in. We're getting a little sick of hearing of our 3 projects, so it's always nice to have other people come and share. Our projects are amazing, but we want new blood, new projects to hear about and critique, and new people to be in the hot seat. So thank you. Anyone else want to share anything else before we say goodbye to Facebook and YouTube? All right, thank you, everybody.
Bye all.